in World War II. 75,000 of those were at the Battle of the Bulge, also known as the Ardennes Offensive. The last major battle of the war in the Ardennes in northern France. That's nearly 1 out of 5 casualties from the war, lasting from December of 1944 to January of 1945. And it was by far the bloodiest and largest battle by the U.S. in World War II. I am alive today because my father came back from that battle. Arnold Schottler, ironically a first-generation American, was born in rural Nebraska in 1913. Oddly, none of his brothers and sisters were taught to speak German. His parents thought Germany was the old world. They came to America and said, "We teach our children English because this is the new world." He never talked about the war. That was the way of his generation, good or bad. When I was in college, I asked him to put together some sort of memory of his service there. He was 7 years old at the time. He didn't go to war to be a hero. He went because that's what was expected of every able-bodied American man at the time. He wrote a matter of fact and honest account of his experience. I'll be using his words from excerpts of his memoir. I know, his hat. I was inducted in the Army in October of 1942, age 29, single. My father had recently died, and my mother had a severe stroke soon after. I talked to the doctor about a deferment, but he said it was to do no good as the damage was already done. I was reluctant to leave, but reported to duty October 31st, Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. After a few days at Leavenworth, doing what was necessary, shots, medical tests, etc., we went on a troop train to Fort Benning, Georgia. We were the first contingent of recruits to join the 10th Armored Division. One of the procedures was to go through classification and to check your work, civilian work history, and from that decide what work or training you'd be best qualified for. I was currently the manager of a grain elevator in Nebraska and had done office work, which required typing, taking shorthand, bookkeeping. From this, they put me down as clerk typist, which meant I would be assigned to some headquarters office. Foolishly, I objected to this. So I was assigned to the 90th Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron. Of course, I had no idea what my duties would be in this kind of outfit, but you can bet in later months I realized what a damn fool I was, particularly after we were in combat. He spent 1943 in basic training and maneuvers in Camp Jordan, Georgia. By the summer of 1944, they had started making preparations to go overseas. D-Day, or Operation Overlord, had already occurred, and the Allies were trying to push the Germans out of France. They left Camp Jordan in September of '44 and boarded a ship out of New York, destined for the Normandy Peninsula. We were the first full division to land at Cherbourg, where it was after it had been recaptured by the Germans, and we were welcomed with enthusiasm by the French. We remained there until about middle October, and then started our way down to the combat area, which took us through the outskirts of Paris. As we neared the Moselle River, we met the enemy for the first time. We were able to reach the river, but the crossing was held up by a blown-out bridge. It was November 11th, Armistice Day. While waiting in the woods for the bridge to be repaired, I thought how wonderful it would be to have another armistice that day. But it was not to be. Soon after crossing the river, we saw heavy casualties along the road, the worst any of us had ever seen. This division was mainly used for reconnaissance and to maintain outposts to detect enemy troop concentrations and movements. In other words, their job was to find the Germans. We moved forward into France, keeping abreast of the enemy movement on the east side. The Germans continued to pull back, and we arrived in Trier, France, about the 10th of December. We were taking a break there, and then came the Battle of the Bulge. On December 16th, the Allies were surprised by a German attack. December 19th, we received our orders to move and headed north towards Luxembourg, which put us on the south flank of the heavy movement. This was fortunate for us, because most of the action was to the north. Troop B of our squadron was in Bastogne on the northern flank, and history records what happened there. As we neared the front, We were able to reach a wooded area on the side of the hill where we directed artillery fire on the Germans and were enjoying this until they spotted us and started directing fire back. We had no casualties, did damage their installations. On Christmas Eve, we pulled back to a small town so we didn't have to sleep out in the snow, which was a nice gift. After the Bulge action was over, we started east again, toward the Rhine River, which we eventually crossed, but somehow we got too far east from our main body and almost got surrounded by the Germans from the east. We had to move back north and did so at night. Along the way, some prisoners had been captured, and our platoon was assigned to move them. In going back north, the Germans had taken back a small town and attacked us as we were on the outskirts. It was a far superior force, and our commanding officer ordered us to turn back. Naturally, we had some action there, and later I was awarded the Bronze Star for my participation. Now let me tell you about what that participation was. They were in a convoy transporting German prisoners and escorted by armored cars that were being ambushed. After outrunning that ambush, they ran into another ambush of 100 German soldiers. My father moved his vehicle to his position and protected the right flank of the column. He stayed in that position until all danger was past. This is from his Bronze Star citation, which said he demonstrated extraordinary bravery and attention to duty, which earned him this medal. In another incident, he also received a leg injury when his armored car hit a road line. The explosion blew off the wheel and landed them in the ditch. Because of the thick steels protecting them, there were no injuries except for some minor cuts and scrapes. And he says, I received a small cut on my leg and could have put in for the Purple Heart, but my pride wouldn't let me do it. I wish later I had done it, so it would have been worth 5 more points in the point system to get me home earlier. He arrived back in the United States on Christmas Eve, 1945, and they were unable to disembark because all dock personnel had gone home for the holidays. He arrived home December 31st, 1945, 38 months to the day after he left Nebraska. His mother was still alive and lived for 3 more years to enjoy his company. Having these memories is priceless to me. I thought of my father I really had never heard him talk about. And what struck me most was his humility in this. He didn't go to war to be a hero. He went to do his duty and preserve our liberty, as many have done before and since.